Welcome, fellow chill seekers, to Lady Grimm, where the veil between our world and the unknown grows thin. I am your guide through these chilling tales, your mistress of mystery, the one who weaves nightmares into haunting words. I am the Lady Grimm, and I bid you a bone-chilling welcome. In the depths of darkness, we gather each week to explore the realms of the paranormal, where things that go bump in the night come alive, and the line between reality and horror blurs. Join me in this week's installment as we question the boundaries of what's possible and journey into the heart of our darkest fears. So brace yourselves and gather round, fellow believers, skeptics, and curious minds alike. Without further ado, let's embark on this week's gripping tale. Take a deep breath and get comfortable, for we're about to descend into the abyss. Welcome to Lady Grimm, where the paranormal comes alive. My town and the surrounding area has been in economic decline for years. As businesses closed and moved away, abandoned buildings loomed all along the highways leading into town. The vast properties clung like shadows to the outskirts of town, a constant reminder of death and decomposition. It was hard for people around here, and most people moved away for better opportunities elsewhere. I wanted to do the same, but my mom still lived in town and refused to leave. She can't walk very well anymore, and asking her to uproot for me, or moving and making her live alone, was just too much to ask. I'd stay until I had to go. My plan was to wait and save. There was a new industry cropping up, though, and I literally mean growing. With laws changing, certain plant growers needed indoor spaces to grow year-round, and these old facilities were perfect. I went out on a limb and bought a drone. I plan to use it to get into aerial photography for real estate businesses interested in marketing to these growers. I grew up with a controller in my hand, so drone flying was easy for me to pick up, basically real-life gaming. I contracted with a woman named Josephine, a business realtor in the city who needed drone work done before Monday. It was 7:20 p.m. on Thursday. She gave me a list of 3 addresses. The faster I could submit the footage, the better. I got an early start on Friday morning. It was summer, which meant longer daylight hours, and the footage would really pop with all the greenery. The downside was that the locations were badly overgrown. I had to stay close to the drone because if I crashed it, finding it in the underbrush would be a huge pain. I completed 2 buildings before noon, and if I hustled to the last one, I could edit overnight and everything would be waiting in Josephine's inbox by Saturday morning. I reached the last property, the Fog Mining Complex, at 4:28 p.m. The layout was huge. There was a main administrative building that had 4 stories, flanked by 2 smaller flat buildings. The second of these 2 was located close to the mine entrance and had a large landing area, presumably where equipment was staged before being used in the mine. It was the farthest building from me, so I decided to end with that one. I loaded new batteries and threw the drone up to record. I had only been filming for about 3 minutes when the low battery warning came on. Well, that was odd. The batteries were supposed to be fresh. Drone batteries do die fast, so I had plenty of extras and a recharge station in my car. The battery had drained so fast, I didn't even have time to bring the drone back to me before it died. Now I had to go look for it. The last footage I saw was of the back of the administrative building, so I trekked across the entrance of the building, wildly overgrown and littered with old trash. I had been so focused on getting my deadline met that I hadn't considered what I could be walking into. The last 2 properties I had already completed were closer to town and probably better patrolled by police. There had been far less trash, and there were clear "keep out" signs and barricades. This building had no signs and no barricades. It was freely accessible to anyone who drove down the old mining road I had taken to get here. I listened for any sign of movement near the buildings and scanned around me as I approached the side of the building. It was quiet except for birds and the sound of my own steps along the overgrown pavement. The underbrush was starting to creep along the building's walls, and I had to keep close to avoid getting tangled. I turned the corner to the back of the building and saw my drone caught in some branches. I was relieved to see I didn't have to go climbing for it, and that it was still in one piece. I picked it up and was about to install new batteries when the full charge indicator lit up. I stood looking at it, confused as to why it was now reading full charge when it had just died and fallen into the trees. I ran through my head the possibilities of why it would have stopped working, and I figured I must have hit a button on the controller. I was backtracking around the corner of the building towards where I had been when I got a thunderstorm alert warning on my phone. I knew I was running out of time. I launched the drone again, this time finishing my loop around the building without issue. I landed the drone gently and checked the battery. It had plenty of battery life left. I could hear a low rumble of thunder in the distance and started working faster. I changed some settings and sent the drone up again. I only had the 2 shorter buildings left. To get to the first of the 2 smaller buildings, I had to walk around the administrative building. There was a path, as though something or someone had been walking there regularly. The thought that there could be somebody living on the property was really getting into my head at this point. It was quiet, but I started feeling like I was being watched. I looked up at the wall of the tall building, pockmarked by broken windows. The fact that someone could be looking down on me from one of those windows, watching me as I moved around this empty building alone, gave me the creeps. As I reached the back of the building, the path that had been worn down in the brush led towards the building closest to the mine. I figured that if I could stay away from that last building, I might be able to avoid any confrontation with a homeless person or someone hanging around that old abandoned building. I sent the drone up again and suddenly became aware that the whirring sound of the drone was all I could hear. The sounds of birds and trees had stopped entirely. Everything had gone silent. I watched as my drone cleared the roof and the second building, and I had to concentrate to be sure it didn't hit anything on that roof. I was just finishing the loop around the back of building number 2 when I heard a giant crack of thunder. I was almost out of time. I couldn't let the drone get wet, but I also didn't want to have to come back here tomorrow. As I flew the drone back to me, I saw movement inside the darkness of the third building. It was fast, like animal fast. By the time I looked from the drone to the building, nothing was moving. Everything was still. I checked the battery, and it was about to die, so I switched to a fresh one and sent it up one last time. For a little flair, I had planned to send the drone around the back of the building and end with a shot pulling away from the landing area. Even with the storm coming, being pressed for time, and being a little freaked out by this old property, I wanted to get the shot just right. I sent the drone around the back of the building, and as I brought it towards the front, I could have sworn that I saw something moving in the doorway of the building where the platform was. But I had already veered away from the door, and the drone was heading back towards me. Just like before, the battery suddenly went dead. The breeze was picking up and the air smelled like rain. I had to get out of there. Somewhere between me and that last building, the creepy one where I thought I'd seen movement, I had to go rescue my drone. I was feeling pretty scared, but I didn't really have time to think. I had to go get that drone and save the footage before it started raining. I tracked through the underbrush and the loose bricks scattered around from the crumbling old buildings, and finally reached the spot where I thought my drone had landed. I looked everywhere in the underbrush, but couldn't find it. I had to go closer. As I reached the rise leading to the platform of that last building, I could feel the first drops of rain starting. I rushed ahead and then stopped in my tracks. Just ahead of me, in the center of the courtyard, was my drone, standing neatly on its little feet, as though someone had placed it in the dead center of the platform. I scanned around quickly, but saw nothing. There was no movement, just the quick pops of raindrops landing on the dusty platform. I ran forward and picked up my drone. And again, it not only had power, but also a full charge. I was about to turn and jog down to my car when I saw movement at the door leading from the platform into the dark building, just 60 feet or so away from me. Standing just inside the dark building was something hideous. Something or someone terrifying was standing there, smiling at me. To say it was human would be generous. It looked like a corpse come to life, leaning forward, its neck jutting towards me, craned at a weird angle. It grinned wildly at me. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. I don't know how long we looked at each other, but it felt like minutes passed. I remember feeling stuck. I took a step backwards, and its smile grew. I had to run, but I couldn't make my feet move. I could feel the rain hitting my face, and the thought that my drone shouldn't get wet crossed my mind, but these were rational thoughts, and what I was looking at was not rational. I turned and ran down the path, the same path that now made sense for being worn down. I felt my feet slamming against the ground, the shock of each footstep sending pain up my legs as I willed them to go faster. Behind me, I heard it coming after me. It was fast, but I had a head start. I could see my car ahead. It was raining hard now, and the underbrush was slick. I remember thinking that falling would be the last thing I would ever do. I grabbed the car door handle and threw it open, thankful that this small town taught me I didn't need to lock my doors. I threw the drone into the passenger seat and got in. I looked up towards the path and saw nothing but rain and that horrifying old administrative building. I squealed my tires getting out of there and drove straight home. I don't think I caught my breath or even slowed down for the entire 20-minute drive. I tried coming up with reasons for what I had seen. Was it somebody playing a prank? Why would somebody's face look so distorted, and why would they be there watching and then chasing me? I debated what to do next. I knew how crazy my story would sound to the police or anybody else. I started convincing myself that it was somebody who wanted to scare people away from the building. Something totally rational, something that wasn't paranormal. My mom was still awake when I got home, watching one of her true crime shows on TV in the dark. She looked up as I came in. "I knew it was you. I saw you on the camera." My mom was a little paranoid and liked knowing who was coming into the house. She had me install a camera inside the door, even though the only person she saw coming and going was me. It was a cheap little camera, and she could check the feed from her phone. It was a safe town, but it made her feel safer, so I didn't care. She turned back to her show, and I didn't stop to talk. I wanted to see the drone footage, but was also terrified to watch. "You locked the door, right?" "Yep," I lied. I closed the door to my room, locking that door behind me, just in case. I didn't want to be disturbed. I kicked off my wet boots and socks and changed my clothes. I turned on my computer and connected the drone. My lips were dry as I forwarded through to the end. When I was filming the second building, there was movement in the third building. Something rushed past a window. It was a gray flash moving towards the door, but then it never reappeared. I forward to the end. As the drone rounded the corner of the last building, it picked up movement at the door. But then it started spinning and the video cut out. I went back and tried slowing it down. But there was just that gray flash of movement, nothing discernible. The next clip is of my feet walking towards it, and of my face checking the camera. The last seconds before I saw it. The creature I saw there was never clearly visible in any of my footage. As I sat trying to think, I was aware of a sound coming from the door. It sounded like my mom was walking in the hallway, and I was glad I had locked the door. I needed to consider my next move, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to share what had happened with anyone just yet. I heard the TV in the living room. It was loud. A woman was screaming. Those true crime shows were so dramatic. I put on my headphones so I could concentrate. I wanted proof of what I'd seen, but I had none. If I told people what had occurred, they'd think I was lying. Honestly, a part of me thought that if I had found some creepy footage, I could at least post it on YouTube and go viral. Something good could come out of all the hell I'd been through today. I just needed the footage, and I didn't have any. After all that adrenaline finally left my body, I must have fallen asleep. I woke up and the TV was still on. That was strange. It was past 1, long past my mom's usual bedtime. I opened my door and walked towards the living room. It was dark, but the floor was still wet from my boots. The TV was playing some old sitcom now. I peeked into the room, and the chair where my mom had been sitting was now black. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I turned on the lamp by the chair. The chair was covered in blood. It was drenched. Blood pooled on the seat, all over the floor, and splashed up against the walls. I stumbled backwards and fell, slipping on the wet floor. Looking down the hallway, I saw more blood and drag marks leading to the front door, then disappearing under it. I saw my own footsteps. I had been walking in that blood. I screamed. I called for my mom, but there was no answer. I flipped over onto my hands and knees and slid on the wet floor. Everything I touched was drenched in blood. I was covered in blood. My hands were red now. I ran to my mom's bedroom, but it was empty. The house was silent except for the TV and the pounding in my brain. I ran sliding to the front door and flung it open. The drag marks continued into the grass and towards the woods. It was so dark I couldn't see much beyond that. My car was parked where I'd left it, but the driver's side back door was wide open. My mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. I could feel the panic rising, and my skin was clammy. My mom's camera! I ran back to the living room. The smell of blood was suffocating. I picked up her phone and searched for the app. There were 3 movement notifications. The first was me entering the house. The second clip showed the front door opening and that thing from the mine slipping through the door and into my house. It skitters down the hallway unnaturally. I am full on panicking now. I cannot breathe. It must have been in the car with me. I hit play on the last notification. It was this thing, this creature, dragging my mother's eviscerated body down the hallway of my house towards the front door. Before it leaves, it turns and stands at my bedroom door. Then it slowly turns to the camera and smiles. That horrific face is there in my house, staring at me through that camera. Then the camera cuts out and there's only static. That thing had gotten into my unlocked house, walked past my bedroom, and had killed my mom with me in the next room. I had brought it home. It was my fault she was dead. With shaking hands and my whole body shivering uncontrollably, I dialed the police. 911, what's your emergency? Something killed my mom. I have the footage. I told them what happened and hung up the phone. I sobbed as I waited for the police. Through my tears, I heard the drone in my bedroom turn on. If you enjoyed that story, I'm glad you found me. I tell creepy stories about scary encounters and paranormal events. If this is your thing too, stay, listen, and subscribe to Lady Grimm for more stories. It's okay to keep the lights on. Let me tell you another story. I'm a gig worker who did typing and computer work for the elderly. It didn't start out that way, but most of the jobs I picked up back then involved helping older people navigate technology. It wasn't too bad, and actually paid pretty well for what it was. I was contacted by a man named Robert who had recently lost his vision and needed some data entry work done. He lived about 70 miles outside of the city, and normally I wouldn't take a job that far, but I was strapped for cash and needed to pay rent. We agreed on an 8-hour block of time to start with, and I was scheduled to be at his house on a Monday morning. I used Waze to get familiar with the route, and getting there seemed pretty straightforward. I took the highway for the first stretch of the drive, and then took his exit. It was fall, and the leaves were changing, which made the drive really beautiful, actually. I made a few turns until the roads were no longer paved, and then I drove some more until I found the right number at the end of a long, winding driveway. It was a beautiful house that blended right into the landscape. It was nice, but you could tell that it was past its prime. It needed some landscaping and some repairs, but nothing major. Robert was a nice man, deliberate and kind, and was still learning to navigate his own house with his new blindness. He wore sunglasses, and when I asked him how he had lost his sight, he said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe me if I told you." I didn't ask him any more about his condition. I wondered how he was able to live all alone in this big house in the middle of the woods. His housekeeper, Abby, was there a few hours a day, but otherwise he was by himself. He showed me to his home office, which was full of books and paperwork, with an entire wall made of glass that overlooked the woods. I remember thinking how devastating losing his sight must have been for an avid reader, and how losing this beautiful view of the forest would kill me. We got to work. He dictated to me, and I typed for hours. We took breaks, and Abby made us some tea. It was actually a great day, out there surrounded by trees, away from everyone and everything. It was relaxing. I lost track of time until I saw Abby getting her jacket on. She seemed like she was in a rush and said a quick goodbye to Robert. She gave me a nervous half smile, and out she went. She walked quickly to her car and drove down the driveway. It was getting dark, and I checked the clock. 4:33 p.m. I had about an hour left with Robert, and I let him know. We wrapped up a few more transcriptions, and I gathered my things. He told me that he'd like me to come back next week for more hours, and he hoped I could make time in my schedule for a weekly appointment with him. We agreed to it, and I shook his outstretched hand. I packed my laptop and realized the house was pretty dark both inside and out. I suppose when you can't see, it doesn't matter, but just the same, I wish there was more light, especially for me getting to my car and then down the road. He showed me to the door and told me to drive safely and keep my doors locked. I didn't think much of his warning, but keeping your doors locked seemed a little overkill way out here from the city. As I left, I heard him double lock the door behind me. I started the drive back home. I turned left out of his long driveway and was just getting into my podcast when I realized it was taking too long to get to the first intersection before the highway. The road was more winding than I'd remembered, and when I didn't reach the paved part of the road, I knew I had gone in the wrong direction. I tried pulling up Waze again, but there was no signal. I would need to backtrack on my own. It was true dark now, and there weren't many landmarks as I drove. The fallen leaves on the road didn't help. I saw them dust up behind me as I drove. I knew I must have taken a wrong turn early on, but then I'd taken a couple of turns after that, obviously also wrong, and now I was fully lost. I was feeling uncomfortable and confused. I hated being lost. I stopped the car and put it in park. I just needed to take a few deep breaths and get my mind centered again. I turned the podcast down and actually opened the window. Maybe if I cleared my head. I put it back in drive and kept going. There was a bend ahead, and I craned my neck to see what was beyond it. Just around the bend, about 30 feet ahead of me, was a person standing in the road. He was wearing a black hooded sweatshirt, and I couldn't see his face because of the angle of his head. He didn't have a car that I could see, and he wasn't moving. I was stunned, just idling there in the night, facing this person who was just not moving. I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew I had to get out of there. I started backing up, and that's when he raised his head. He had a horrifying face. Was it a mask? It looked like his skin was loose, and it didn't fit his face. His eyes were bulging, and there were no eyelids. Then he smiled with hideous teeth and started running full tilt towards my car. I floored it. I lurched forward with the impact of my car hitting the tree behind me. I had no hope of getting away on these tight wooded roads. My head hit the headrest hard, and I felt a little woozy, but I had to get it together. My car was wedged across the road, and I could see him reaching for the unlocked passenger door. I popped open my door and started running. I ran into the woods, my face and arms feeling the sting of branches. As I lurched forward, I heard a laugh behind me. It sounded inhuman. As I ran, I heard that thing gaining on me. "My new eyes don't work as well as I'd like. I'll take yours instead."